Good morning, everyone. We made it. TGIF, your favorite DAT team here is ready to go for our Friday Proof of Delivery podcast. This is our third episode. I can't believe we made it this long without getting canceled, Kary and Dean. It's quite the accomplishment.
Don't speak too soon. Today could be the day.
Today could be the day. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We got a lot to talk about today. I'm Ken Adamo. I am El Capitan de Analytico here at DAT. Kary?
I think I don't know what's in your coffee this morning. You were busting a move before we went live. Good things are happening.
Good things are
Uh,
happening.
well, good to see you, Ken. How's the week been?
It's good. I use the Spanish version of my title to celebrate Cinco de Mayo, which we won't see our audience before Cinco de Mayo, and it will happen in between episodes. But I am very much looking forward to some nachos, perhaps a margarita, however the wind may blow.
Did you know that Cinco de Mayo is not a big deal at all in Mexico?
I did not know that, but
this is how we get canceled, baby.
Maybe this is how we get canceled. You know, it's a big deal for me. I have a deep and profound love for nachos. I think it's
I'm
a
very
preferred
happy
way
for
to
you.
eat anything.
Yeah.
Well, I just mentioned that because I lived in Mexico 7 or 8 years ago, and I moved, I think, on May 1st or something. So my first week in the office, I pulled on up and said, "Hey, what are the big plans for Cinco de Mayo?" And everyone was like, "That is an American holiday. We do not really care about that here."
Yeah.
Well,
It's in commemoration of some pretty minor battle in Puebla, and it just has become like a U.S. beer holiday. But I'm not trying to rain on your parade at all, Ken. I'm excited for you.
yeah, I mean, $20-ounce giraffes and $2 margs. That's a holiday by any definition that I've ever understood, you know?
Exactly.
All right, Dean, do you want to? It's hard to imagine anyone wouldn't know Dean Croak, especially after his multiple cameos on major network news last week. But do you want to give everyone a quick intro on yourself, Dean?
Yeah. So I work for Ken on his team, on the data analytics team. I'm a market analyst, so I spend most of my time focusing on the supply and demand outside of the DAT network to try and make sense of what we're seeing in the data and to give our shippers, carriers, and brokers a much insight into where we think the market's heading. So that's kind of my key role. In fact, I'm off to Texas next week. Cinco de Mayo, I'll be with CR England on Monday at their leadership conference. Also going to a NASCAR event on the Sunday in Dallas, which will be a lot of fun. It's my first event. So that's
nice. They're really good at left-hand turns. And if you haven't known, I hate to spoil it for you, but they're really good at those left-hand turns.
I'm more interested in the pit. I want to go in and see all the car haulers, the big trucks that haul the cars around. That's what I'm going for, not so much the racing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we'll bring Dean back, I think, in a few. That's the plan, while Kary and I go through some administrative work here. We'll see you in a few minutes, Dean.
Gotcha.
All right, so a lot going on out there. We're going to save the meaty topics, I think, for Dean. But our own Kary Jablonski was on the ground in Indianapolis this week. Is that where the conference was?
It was.
So you want to give us a little redux of Broker Carrier Summit?
Yeah, so this was, I think, the second one I had been to, and the unique part of the Broker Carrier Summit is that there's no trade show booth. If you go to TIA or Manifest, I mean, the center of those shows is the big exhibit hall where every booth has their extremely personable salespeople out on the floor trying to generate leads, talk to customers, make some business happen. But this show is really all about having more genuine connection. So there's no booth hall, which is actually, I found is pretty effective because it does actually free folks up to be a little bit less guarded and a little bit more open. They realize, there's the only place to actually connect is in the general conference area. So you might as well talk to people. So I do like that about the show. The overall mood was a little somber. Or tired is kind of how I'd describe it. From just the brokers, I spent more time with brokers, but I did catch up with some carriers. Went out to dinner with a bunch of brokers on Wednesday night, and I think everyone's just a little tired right now. And I think we'll probably talk more about that when we talk tariffs and everything with Dean. But just a lot of kind of hurry up and wait uncertainty brewing in the air. kind of the same themes as we've seen at other shows too. AI, every single show, there's 5 new AI vendors that have popped up. I did notice a lot of brokers mention that it seems like there are more non-freight focused vendors now starting to attend these shows and trying to get into the game. It's probably earlier stage AI companies looking to find product market fit and trying out a bunch of different verticals, figuring out where they do fit. But other than that, it was I was only there for about 36 hours, moderated panel visibility, had some good chats about that. But overall, maybe it's because the lighting and the physical space was a little bit dark. It just felt a little bit somber.
I had 2 people use like mortuary references. Like basically, I think it was like the lighting, it seemed like some of the architecture looked a little pre-Victorian kind of, and then like the overall somberness of the conference.
The hotel was actually pretty cool. It was an old train station, so some of the rooms were actually in train cars at the Crown Plaza in Indianapolis. But it almost gave off, there's about to be a murder in here kind of vibes.
A whodunit, like
Yeah,
murder
exactly,
mystery in the freight industry. It's
exactly.
always the lumpers. I'm telling you, I hate to spoil all of your mysteries, but it's always the lumpers. Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been a busy 2 weeks since we were last together on the M&A and kind of corp dev landscape as well out there. I didn't write down any deals of consequence to talk about, but just there's a lot going on behind the scenes. I'm sure there was a lot of chatter at BCS, and I'm sure TIA before that of some things in flight. I equated this to the old school sidewalk sales when you go to like strip malls and Talbots or whatever would put out a bunch of stuff out front. I think a lot of these VCs are trying to get the heck out. A lot of them have been pretty long in the tooth on some of their investments, and the uncertainty is not doing these companies any favors.
Yeah, there definitely was chatter across the conference, and I moderated the panel, and I kicked it off. Trucker Tools acquired by DIT last year, passed it over to a member of the Descartes team, had just acquired PCS, My Carrier Portal before that. Then it was passed over to someone who had worked with green screens, acquired by Triumph recently. So it's just bang, bang, bang all in a row. You can start to see the chips are starting to fall in different places.
I need to check in. I haven't seen that green screen deal actually close. I know that there was just being that Triumph's a bank, that probably some extended closing terms there, but I just haven't seen that one close. I need to follow back up on that one.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything about that at BCS.
Bankers, who needs them? Not Triumph. I meant like deal bankers.
We're towing the cancellation line here.
Bankers have never canceled anyone. I mean, they canceled
kidding.
themselves if you ask Lehman Brothers, but that's probably a deep cut for some folks. All right, so we're going to bring Dean back because I think honestly the 2 topics du jour here right now are tariffs and English proficiency.
Yep.
I think it's probably best, Dean, to start with tariffs. I'll just tee this up. There's been a lot of very creative reporting this week. I think people taking some very well-timed shots of major harbors where they're empty. So I think, like, how can you help us make sense of the truth versus some of the hype there around import volumes and what that means for us?
Yeah, I just looked at the data from the Marine Exchange this morning on the number of vessels that are headed into the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. That represents about 30% of national volume, roughly, maybe a third. And then about 50% of that comes from China. So it's a really good way to take the pulse of what are the impacts. So right now, we're seeing about a 20% drop in the vessels due to arrive in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So we're seeing this week will be the tail of the pre-tariff surge in container ships heading to the West Coast. And that the West Coast, that starts all the way from Prince Rupert all the way down to San Diego. But most of it's going to be in the port of Los Angeles. So they're starting to see a big drop-off. Kip Lauder, Captain Kip at the Marine Exchange, said that they've got about 30 container ships that have blanked their sailing schedule or port call in Los Angeles. So they've got a rotation, but they're skipping West Coast ports already. And there's about 30 of those that are scheduled to miss the port of Los Angeles in the next 4 to 5 weeks. Normally that's probably in the range of less than 5. So the fact that they've got that many forward-looking cancellations tells you that we're about to see a big drop-off. So I think that's where the focus is. So that'll be this week. And then the week after, you'll see the impact on the East Coast because of the exit transit time of those vessel rotations through the Panama Canal. So I think that's sort of the summation right now. Gene Soroka from the Port of Los Angeles expects that in May their volumes will be down about 35%. He was on NBC last week talking about that. So I think that's the big story on tariffs, and that has immediate implications, of course, for dray carriers at every port in the country, but mostly I think Los Angeles because of the exposure to Chinese imports.
How do you think? I was chatting with someone, one of our friendly Canadian neighbors earlier this week, trying to get a handle on this. And for a number of years, the volume into Vancouver and Prince Rupert has been there as a pressure release valve for some of what's happened in the Kansas City Southern CN merger. Essentially, made it possible to go all the way from Vancouver to Dallas if you wanted to on a combined rail network. How much do you see of like diversions going north, less due to congestion and more due to tariff policy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a viable alternative because it's also a day closer from Shanghai. It's 1,200 kilometers closer, so it's a full day sailing closer to Vancouver than it is to Los Angeles. So I expect those on-dock rail services they run direct into Chicago will become a real focal point for diversions, more so than the East Coast ports into Canada through the St. Lawrence Seaway or Halifax in Nova Scotia. That could be another point.
Do you think that they'll just forward stock? Because like bonded warehouses and free trade zones, my understanding is there's not a crumb to go around there in the United States. Do you suspect they'll just move it closer to the major North American crossings and wait it out? Is that what you kind of think the main strategy would be?
I think that's the strategy. I think there's been a little bit of spin in some of the press releases I've been reading here where people are saying just enough to stay out of the crosshairs, but not enough to commit them to a long-term capital investment that's going to be hard to reverse down the track. If you think about the Stellantis deal that was done in the UAW agreement late last year, they agreed to open one of, I think it was the Belvedere plant. That was part of that deal with the UAW. That won't open until 2027. The reopening of that light duty pickup factory. So I think the point is it takes a long time for these to come to fruition. And I think some people are saying just enough to get them through maybe the midterms and then, hoping that things change, or at least hope they change in the short term. I think that's everybody's strategy here is say enough to stay out of trouble, but not enough to commit yourself until we have a bit more certainty.
I was reading an article this week, Dean, that suggested damage has been inflicted and done. And even if things were to roll back completely right now, there would be significant impact for the kind of coming year plus. So it sounds like folks are making decisions just to get them through the next short period of time. Let's say, given that we live in an uncertain world, these tariffs reverted back to what they were 150 days ago today. What do you think would happen? How long would it take for us to get back to where we were? Or has the damage been inflicted?
I think there's been a lot of damage inflicted, particularly with international trade, because there was a saying that data was the new oil many years ago. I think trust is the new oil now. Once you lose trust with your negotiating partners, it's hard to come back from that. Even if you say something, what's happening now is people don't know. Tim Fiore from the ISM PMI did a great podcast yesterday. It was fairly damning. He said people are not investing, they're not spending because they don't know what's coming. And so lacking clarity, I think the damage has been done. Even if things were announced that it's over, I think there's a sense that even if we said things are over, it could change next week. And that's where I think the damage has been done. North of the border, substantial damage has been done with our Canadian partners. There's a lot of mistrust there. And I think we've seen this playbook before, Kary, like in the 2018-2019 tariff situation. We suffered greatly on the export front, and you use China and soybeans, for example. They immediately sought to de-risk from the US and went to Brazil. Brazil's now the largest supplier of agricultural products to China, whereas once we were. So I think you can multiply that across every commodity line. I think that we'll see long-term damage there, just so people protect themselves. It's like the opposite of China Plus One, which was our supply chain strategy after the pandemic. People sought to de-risk from China and then find another source as some redundancy. I think we're going to see the opposite of that now, where people are going to look for US plus one supply chain redundancy.
So the big people who have been in this game a while, right? We think around like the seasons of freight, and with the lag in ocean, it kind of, you have to like level set. It's like when you're on Pacific time and your family's back home, you got to like re-level set, right? So, how do you think about, so like back to school is the thing that everyone should be thinking about right now, right, Dean? I mean, there's really like little argument about from like the calendar that's the stuff that we should be worrying about coming across on boats from Asia.
Yep.
What's like in your own internal clock when, this is an awful dad pun, but the ship has sailed, for there to not be disruption with the back to school goods?
I think once you get into the start of June, you're starting to get into a time frame where you won't have the goods on the ocean and in place before you start to get them into retail stores. I think that's when you start to see the big issues. I mean, they're going to start to order back to school in the next 4 to 5 weeks based on some of the shippers that we've spoken to this week. Now, you've obviously got some large shippers that have been able to amass large levels of inventory, assuming they're in season stock, backpacks and things like that. If you could have pulled those forward, then I think there are some people that will have plenty of inventory. But for the smaller retailers, we're getting to a point, especially if they don't have the capital to pull forward inventory and store it, we're getting to a point in the next 4 to 5 weeks where we're going to see people not be able to order the normal volume that they would. Now, notwithstanding that, fireworks we have no problem with, right? Now, so I looked at the fireworks imports. About 90% of the world's fireworks come from China, and Mr. Ding, as he's known, controls about 70% of that into the US. Pretty savvy guy. And I thought, what's going to happen now with fireworks for July 4? And of course, when I looked at the TEU import data, the minute the election was over, the import container volumes of fireworks doubled in November and then doubled again in December compared to the November, December for the prior 8 years. So normally fireworks peak in May, but most of it's already here sitting in warehouses, which is potentially a volatile situation. But I think we have plenty of fireworks, so don't despair. We'll still be able to light things on fire this July 4 without any worries.
So just to wrap that up and maybe move on to the next topic. So in the next few weeks, basically the manifest will be being built around back to school goods. That'll arrive and be on store shelves. Let's call it early July, give or take. So we've got about a month to play with, I think, of things to somewhat resolve. But my understanding, and doing my little research this morning, that we're probably not any closer to a trade deal. I mean, there was a little bit of a blip of a headline last night. I don't know how the market's been reacting, but there's really not much progress been made, especially with the primary imports coming out of Asia.
Yeah. I mean, Damon makes a good point in the comments about the size of the vessels too, because potentially you start to see larger vessels making port calls that are only in certain ports can take those size vessels. And then I think it's in, I don't know how many months away it is, but you've got the additional charge on Chinese-made vessels coming into US ports as another factor to take into account here in terms of the port rotations, the vessel rotations. We should get Damon on the show. He's our resident British Columbia truck operator.
Good idea. All right, so the next big thing happening is the executive order so 2 parts here, and Dean will correct me if I'm wrong, resume enforcement of English language proficiency for CDL holders, and also to make it an out of service violation where it was just a regular violation and they could kind of get a ticket and go down the road previously. So can you kind of give a little bit more expert color on that, Dean, like the changes? Yeah,
it's one of the few subjects that's made my blood boil as much as it has in the last week. As an immigrant who's been subject to racism in this country in the last 10 years, it's pretty close to home when it comes to minority groups being targeted. And I say that because it's estimated about 65 million, or 1 in 5 Americans, are considered illiterate. And I know a lot of truckers, my generation, whose partner would fill in their paper logbooks for a week in advance before they hit the road because they couldn't read or write. So what this didn't start out as in March in Arkansas as a push to improve literacy levels in the workforce in general. It started out as an attack on minorities who couldn't read and write. So the policy position wasn't let's improve everybody and raise the standard. The idea was let's target people who supposedly can't read and write. Now, if you follow that to its extension, that's just not minorities, but it's everybody that would fit into that category, regardless of demographic. But when you follow even worse, the threads on social media that started this, this is definitely targeted at minorities. But I saw an article today that was talking about 100,000 people, and that was going back to 2014. Remember, America is a very different country from 2014 to 2025. Starting with the first Trump administration, it was very clear what sort of position immigrants were in. And if people don't believe that, try being an Australian that speaks different and being told to go back where you came from on at least a dozen occasions. So this is a pretty serious issue for people that can't read or write English, but are desperately trying to make something better for themselves. So I say that, Ken, because I think most of these folks have already left the industry. In fact, most of us expatriates have a very strong social network. We are well connected. The minute that TikTok post popped up on the 6th of March, the whole network of minority groups would have heard about and said, we're going to bypass Arkansas, first of all. And second of all, we're going to find a way to get a job locally or just leave this industry. So I think the exodus is not about to happen. I think it's already happened. And I say that because my expat community's here. I know a lot of people that aren't in trucking that have just gone to ground. Right. So I think the idea that there's still hundreds of thousands of truck drivers out there driving that can't speak and write, I think it's an asinine debate. Like it degrades our industry. It's so annoying. So I don't think it's going to make any difference in the change in capacity, because we've just seen capacity increase in terms of the number of carrier authorities. And I don't think, because of the myriad of English-speaking applications you have to go through to get a carrier authority, it's illogical to think that all the new capacity coming in are the people that can't speak English.
I was talking with a carrier about this at BCS who is Ukrainian, and he was telling me about the community, or the communities around the CDL schools. And we were talking about, can this actually be enforced or not? And he was like, I don't think it actually matters, because this isn't going to be enforced on the road. If this was actually going to impact folks, it would have to be enforced at these school levels, where you've got schools run by different minority groups, where they're speaking in Urdu or Russian or who knows what. Are you familiar with that kind of as a way around some of the English requirements, Dean? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
I'm not aware of any of those other than Spanish. I know that Spanish, there's been a lot of very strong community work in Spanish. But, I travel to Quebec, right? I don't speak French, but I know what a stop sign looks like.
Yep.
This notion that you've got drivers out there that can't read signs that are a danger to the public, Kary, they aren't the guys taking a 30-minute break in the rest island. They aren't the ones cutting you off to get ahead of you because their ELDs are pushing them. These aren't the minorities that are doing this. Do we have too many trucks in the market? Absolutely. But to think it's a minority group, I just don't see it. So I can't single out any one particular group. I do think we've got there's this issue with some minority groups from Europe. I don't think it's some of the more established minority groups here, because the general theme has been against a lot of people from Asia in particular, mostly our Punjab Sikh population, which is a massive population. And they have the largest trucking association in the country in California. Some of the best drivers I know are from that demographic. And they've tended to dominate the long-haul produce sector. Now, the irony here is that English is their second language, right? So, but the notion is that because they're different, they are part of the problem. But what you see is that they've tended to gravitate to certain sectors. So you'll see a lot of teams hauling produce out of Salinas that are a particular demographic. We see capacity tighten around the Diwali Festival of Lights, in Lodi, California, for example. So we've got a very diverse, truck driving community these days. But what people say that doesn't sound right. It doesn't. You go out and sit in a truck stop long enough, and you'll start to see what really goes on. And the best way I can describe it is we have a significant number of minority truckers that pull their side curtain halfway along their driver's side window so other drivers can't see them. Just think that through, that you are so exposed as a minority trucker that you would pull your curtain halfway along so people can't see it. I've seen it and questioned the safety nature of that, because you can't see it, peripheral vision's blocked. But it's far worse than that's far less of a risk than being racially profiled by people on the highway.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is go ahead, Kary. Sorry, I didn't talk.
No, you go for it.
I think this is one of those things where, like, I don't know. I'm sure if you were in political science, you'd have like a word for it. But like, I think most people agree that truck drivers and pilots should speak, read, and write the language in the country that they're operating. I don't think like anyone. I'd feel more comfortable knowing that the pilot at the front of my plane is fluent in English, given that every air traffic controller speaks English.
Right. Yep.
All over the world, right? English is the language of flight.
Yep.
But like you, paying attention and trying to engage in these spaces, it's clear that like this was brought forward in mostly bad faith for nefarious reasons of like,
absolutely.
Oh, don't look at the Creole Cajun who doesn't speak intelligible English, but look at the brown person who immigrated here from the Middle East. And that's the person who this needs to be. And I also think like expecting literacy tests roadside is, we're not even 22% of vehicles operating in this country are unsafe at any speed. And we think we're going to be giving like roadside literacy exams.
Right.
It
just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
that's
that
our
point
least of our problems.
Is exactly. So what do you make of this, Dean? It sounds like you don't suspect that this is going to have an impact on capacity. I think we're all dubious that this is actually going to be enforced at all. Again, back to Ken's point, this is just kind of a politically motivated executive order. Any expectations about what happens here?
I think it's a yawn. I don't think there'll be any impact whatsoever, because these aren't the folks setting low rates. Like, these aren't the people. It just makes no sense to me that this idea that we have too many trucks on the road because of a flood of immigrants. Now, I will say that if you're a CDL holder and you don't live in this country, that's questionable. That shouldn't. I don't see how that can fly at all. So there's some parts of this debate that I think we need to really get our head around and enforce. But come back to this whole notion of violations and lack of are somehow an indicator of a carrier's ongoing stability in the industry or activity. They're fairly rare events. They're random events. They don't happen that often. If you only run interstates, you have an exposure to them. If you don't run interstates, you don't have an exposure to scale houses all the time at the in and out of every state. So the enforcement of this is very, very difficult. Matthew Leffler had a great session on it yesterday. I can't remember where, but he quoted some numbers and he was talking about how hard this is to enforce. And I think there will be some targeting, just like there is targeting when it comes to level 1 inspections. I mean, a lot of the really good trucks that owner-operators, independent contracts have get waved through because they're looking for the next truck that they know the fleets. They're looking for the next truck that's probably going to have more violations on it. So there's even bias at the scale level and the state level and the enforcement officer level when it comes to violation data. Imagine when it comes to doing English proficiency tests.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense that this will have an impact at all.
Yeah, I mean, if it does, I think it's probably in the order of 5 to 10%, which was similar to ELDs. But I think, I don't know. I hate to be, I mean, this is as far as I'll dip my toe into political waters, but like, this is kind of what happens when you have a guy whose main credential is being on road rules running the department. Like you kind of get what you deserve when you do things like this. Like, I think it's a great idea, right? Like in the macro, increased proficiency, I'd love for as part of a CDL to take a bookkeeping module, and more enhanced safety. Look, I was talking to a large fleet owner out of Olive Branch this week, and like, what about making the state of Pennsylvania, right, makes you do annual inspections on your cars, which is like one of the few states I think that does that end to end, not just emissions, right? Why couldn't we do that with trucks? I think that would highly impact the overall safety and maintenance, and it would push truckers out of the market. It would push unsafe, unreliable equipment out of the market. And I think that's what this all comes down to. I think everyone agrees that capacity needs to exit the market. I think there's very different and wildly differently motivated theories on how and who become eliminated from the market.
Yeah. I saw an argument this week that the logic was that if we have non-English speakers out of the industry, somehow our roads will be safer. And the problem with that is, in terms of like the big, multiple layer insurance claims where there's, fatalities and the trucker allegedly loses control of the vehicle. Most of your accident severity comes from something related to human physiology, whether it be circadian rhythms or just straight out sleep deprivation or a microsleep. English or Russian isn't an input into human physiology. Like whether you speak English or not will make no difference to your propensity to fall asleep at the wheel. It's got zero difference. So the idea that somehow they're more risky drivers than everyone else from an accident severity perspective doesn't play out in the data. Now, does it have a factor in terms of education, inability to read, training that wasn't in their base language? To Kary's point, 20 years ago when I moved here, we developed fatigue management and sleep management training programs in Spanish. Like, so for decades, people have been learning about safety, road safety, in multiple languages. So I just think that's not an argument at all from a safety perspective.
Well, you would know. You're kind of the expert on this.
And this probably started a year ago when people would make posts about a driver using a translation app at a shipper's location. Like one of those doesn't make an industry problem. And I use translation apps. I will tell you that this is going to sound bizarre, but American English is very different than even Australian English because we use different words to describe things. And I could see a bill of lading for someone who's new to this country having to translate what the heck I have learned so many words since I worked at DAT that are new words in 5 years that I had never heard before. Because
how much of that was profanity from me?
I knew all of those. But the point, American English is very different, and the way we write is very different. And I have that perspective because I've been taught the Queen's English as well as Australian English, which is barely intelligible. That's why I had to learn how to speak the Queen's English to be understood here. So,
can you give us a couple examples of American English words that were surprising to you?
Like simple ones like the hood of a car. That's the bonnet. Trunk is a boot.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 of them. But in bills of lading, when you talk about products and commodities, for example, candies, in other countries, they're called lollies. So if the bill of lading says 35,000 cartons of candy, someone might not know what that means, but they will type it in and it'll say, oh, that's what this is in your own language.
Yep.
Well, the more you know. All right, we're hard up on time here, Dean. I think we could sit here and talk about this all day. So I wanted to appreciate you jumping on 2 podcasts this week. Dean still holds down the fort with the Tuesday DATIQ market update with Chad Kennedy. So I recommend checking that out if you want to learn what's going on in the market, and puts out a buy equipment type weekly blog that is excellent to keep ahead of the market. So thanks, Dean.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Kary.
All right, Kary, what do we deliver this week?
Oh man, a lot going on. Let's start with lane makers and DATIQ. So pretty cool. Something we talk about all the time is how do we bring our products closer together to make it easier for our users to access what they need at a single point. And lane makers is now integrated into IQ Benchmark. So brokers, shippers can access lane makers from Benchmark in the dashboard, so that if you're looking at a certain lane, you're realizing, okay, I really need to shore up my capacity from Tuscaloosa to Jacksonville, you can actually source carriers in real time using IQ Benchmark right there to start to build your network and become more competitive. So excited about that. We also launched load details personalization for carriers in DAT1, which I know has been a long requested feature. So You can actually drag and drop load details around the screen. We're just building in on all of the good user experience feedback that we've gotten from carriers. It's going to be saved every single time, so you'll be able to really set it and customize your dashboard to look the way that you want it to look. And then finally, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Our Shipper Spot API that was launching, it's out there. So the API is there. If you're interested in getting access to it to understand what spot rates look like for shippers, this is a shipper to broker rather than broker to carrier, which is traditionally what we've been focus on an IQ, reach out to your account manager, you'll get access to the API. And over time, we're also going to be building that into the UI. So a lot going on.
Yeah, just to double click on lane makers, I can't stress enough that is probably the least well-known but most powerful product that we have. I actually couldn't believe when I was a customer that DAT had that data and was put it into an interface. You could search. It's like this. It's this weird meta problem where you can search who's searching, which I think is like the coolest thing. It's like if you've ever done SEO or like who's looking at your website, you could do that, but like who's looking at the loads and who's posting their trucks and on what lanes. And if you're looking to build a network or you have an RFP for a project and you're not using lane makers, I'm not a shill. I'm not a sales guy, but you really, really should be checking out lane makers. If you've got a special project or you're working on an RFP or you need to add some carriers to your network. So that's my plug for that one. All right, we've got some swag to give away for the first 5 folks who register for DatCon using our podcast link. Is that right, Kary?
That's right, except for you need to use the podcast code POD200.
Code, not link. Yes. So that's POD, POD 200 when you go register for DatCon, and the first 5 will get custom DAT Trucker Tools swag. Is that correct?
That's correct. So dat.com/DAC. Go there, pop in the promo code POD200, and got about, if you're on the fence, I give you about 5 minutes before someone else jumps in and jumps in front of you. So get after it.
Our show is not a mortuary vibe. I'm here to tell you it is high energy. We've got shippers. We'll have 120 shippers again, I think, this year in Chicago, brokers and carriers.
And I'm working closely with the marketing team on this. We're trying to do it big, make it the biggest DatCon ever, in part because of the location, which is actually a good segue into our audience Q&A coming up in a moment. But we've just got so many customers in the Chicago, Atlanta area. We want to make it as easy as possible to get as many butts and seats and into the house. So stay tuned for more details to come.
I will personally refund your money if you walk away from DatCon not learning a handful of things around pricing and capacity and building your network. Our team really, really puts a lot of thought into designing sessions and bringing in industry experts that are actually doing the job. And I think that's what separates it from just about any other show, is like hand over mouse practitioners showing you how to use lane makers, how to price RFPs. And it's not really a sales conference. It's a true user conference. So,
yep.
And we don't cage the shippers like they did at Manifest. Manifest is great. Ours is better, but I mean, Manifest is cool too. All right. What's our giveaway today, Kary?
So our giveaway is something really awesome. I think it might be a water bottle of sorts. It is a water bottle and a DAT Trucker Tools water bottle. And
a real one, like a hydro flask, not like a.
Oh, it's not plastic. It is
robust.
Very much carbon fiber, top of the line.
It's got a spoiler.
Yeah. But so the question today for everyone is, what state are most DAT broker customers in? So the way, just give you a little, make sure you understand the methodology. We looked at our 8,000 to 9,000 brokers on our network and looked at their headquarter address and tallied which state has the most HQs. So give us a shout. First person to get the correct answer will win a beautiful water bottle.
Yeah, it's a hydro flask. Like I said, it's not one of those Rogers, trade show brand where the thing's going to give you lead poisoning and grow a third big toe or something like that. So
no microplastics.
No microplastic, no BPAs. RFK is not going to come yelling at DAT anytime soon. So anything else this week before I wrap this up, Kary?
Just another plug. We'll be at the Gartner Supply Chain in Orlando next week. We've got a bunch of people there, and then Jared Stowe, our head of broker product, will be at the FreightWaves Fraud Symposium in mid-May on the 14th. So, lots of opportunities to see folks out in the wild.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we'll see you on the 16th. A bunch of us will be getting ready to head west and south to be with some of our broker customers for our executive symposium event. Between now and then is Mother's Day. I'm reminding all of you to make sure to get your mom some flowers, something nice, maybe make a nice little brunch. Don't forget about mom here between now and then. But with that, I want to thank Dean for joining us. I want to thank our entire crew for help keeping us on task and producing. I think for Kary and I, we're going to sign out this week and go plan our margarita tour of our respective cities. So bye, everyone.
Right.